Chapter 1 of Book 11 of Metaphysics by Aristotle. Chapter 1. The present speculation is concerned about substance, for the first principles and causes of substances are under investigation. For, both if the universe be as one whole, substance constitutes the earliest portion, and if things subsist in a consequent order, in this way likewise would substance be first, and next quality, then quantity. But at the same time, neither, so to say, are these simply considered entities, but qualities and motions, in the same manner even as that which is not whole, and that which is not straight. Therefore, we say that these also are in existence, for instance, that such a thing is not white. Further still, no one of the others possesses a separable subsistence. And to the truth of this statement bear witness also, in reality, the philosophers of antiquity, for they from time to time have investigated into the first principles and elements and causes of substance. Those, to be sure, that our philosophers nowadays have in preference sought to establish universals as substances, for the genera are universals, which they say are first principles, and substances, rather on account of their examining them logically. The philosophers, however, of old regarded singulars as substances, for example, fire and earth, but not a common body. Now, substances are three in number. One, indeed, is cognizant by sense, the existence of which all acknowledge, and one part of this is eternal, and the other subject to decay, as plants and animals. But of the eternal portion of it, it is necessary that we should admit as elements either one or many. But another substance is immovable, and this, some say, involves a separable subsistence, amongst whom some make a division of it into two. Others, however, rank into one nature forms and mathematical entities, whereas others of these admit mathematical entities only as subsisting. The substances that are cognizant by sense belong then, of course, to the department of physical science, for they involve a connection with motion, but the immovable substance belongs to a different science, on the supposition that this possesses no first principle in common with the others. Chapter 2. Substance, cognizant by the senses, however, is susceptible of change. Now, on the supposition that change takes place from things that are opposed, or such as are media, and not from all things that are opposites, for the voice is not a thing that is white, but from that which is contrary, it is necessary that something also subsist capable of undergoing an alteration into contrariety, for contraries do not undergo a change. Further, does this no doubt continue permanent? That which is contrary, however, does not continue permanent, and hence doth there subsist a something third beside contraries, namely matter. If, therefore, changes are four in number, either according to quiddity, or according to quality, or quantity, or the place where, and if simple generation indeed, and corruption be what subsist according to quiddity, and increase and diminution be what subsist according to quantity, and alteration be that according to passion, and motion be that according to place, allowing all this to be the case, the several changes would take place into contrarieties, I mean, such as are involved in singulars. Therefore, it is necessary that matter should undergo a change which can pass into both. Since entity, however, is twofold, everything which undergoes a change is changed from that which is an entity in capacity into that which is an entity in energy, as, for example, from what is white in capacity or potentiality into that which is white in energy. And in like manner also does the case stand with increase and diminution. Wherefore, not only according to accident is it possible that all things be generated from nonentity, but likewise from entity do all things derive their generation. I speak of what is an entity in capacity deriving its generation from a nonentity in energy or activity. And this is the unit of Anaxagoras, for it is better to maintain this than the tenet of certain speculators who are of opinion that all things subsist simultaneously, and it is tantamount to the philosophic dogma of mixture adopted by Empedocles and Anaximander, and resembles the theory of Democritus, viz., that all things subsisted in capacity simultaneously, and not in energy. Wherefore, in this case, they would touch upon matter, that is, the material cause. All things, however, involve matter as many as undergo a change, but entities involve different matter from one another. And of the things that are eternal, as many as are not generable, but movable by an orbital motion, possess matter, yet such matter as is not generable, but is merely moved from this place towards that. Now, one might raise the question from what sort of nonentity generation could arise, for nonentity subsists in a threefold way. If, therefore, there subsists aught in capacity, from this will generation subsist, yet, nevertheless, not from anything whatsoever without distinction, but one thing will be generated from another. Neither is it sufficient to say that all things subsist simultaneously. For entities differ in matter, since why would things infinite in number be generated, but not one thing? For the faculty of the human understanding is one. Wherefore, if likewise matter be one, that would have been generated also in energy, the matter even of which would subsist in capacity. Therefore are there three causes, and three first principles, two indeed amounting to contrariety, of which one sort constitutes the formal principle and the species, and the second privation, but the third cause is matter. Chapter 3. After these inquiries, there remains for us to make our readers aware that neither matter nor form is generated. Now, I speak thus of the extremities of things, for everything that undergoes any change is changed both by something and into something. By something, of course, I mean that which is the first imparter of motion, and of something, that is, matter, and that into which the thing is changed. This is the form. Therefore, they go on in a progression to infinity, if not only the brass becomes spherical, but also the spherical, or the brass is generated. Therefore, must we sooner or later come to a standstill in the series. After these inquiries, we must show how that each substance is generated from one synonymous with itself. For those things that are being generated by nature, as well as other things, are substances. For things are produced either by art, or nature, or chance, or spontaneity. Art indeed, therefore, constitutes a first principle which subsists in another subject, whereas nature constitutes a first principle which subsists in the thing itself. For man begets man, and the remaining causes are the privations of these. Substances, likewise, are three in number, and one of these is matter, which is this certain particular thing in consequence of its appearance as such. For as many things as are one by contact, and not by cohesion, constitute matter and a subject, but another of these substances is nature, which likewise is this certain particular thing, and into nature is there the transition of a certain habit. Further, the third substance is that which subsists from these, and is ranked as a singular, for example, Socrates or Callias. As regards some things, therefore, this certain particular thing involves no subsistence independent of a composite substance, as the form of a house, unless art constitutes this form. Neither is there any generation and corruption of these, but after a different manner they are, and are not, both the house itself, which is unconnected with matter, and health, and everything that is produced according to art. But if forms subsist, they subsist in the case of those things that are generated by nature. Wherefore, doubtless, not injudiciously affirmed Plato that forms belong to those things as many as involve a natural subsistence, on the supposition of the existence of forms different from, or independent of, these, as, for example, fire, flesh, the head, and so forth. For all these things are matter, and belong to substance especially, I mean such a description of matter as is ultimate. Some causes, therefore, that are those that impart motion, subsist as entities that have been previously generated, whereas other causes, which subsist as the formal principle, are simultaneously generated with their results. For when a man is in sound health, then also is there present with him sound health, and the form of the brazen sphere subsists simultaneously with the brazen sphere. And whether also there remains anything subsequently to the separation of form from the subject of form, we must examine, for in the case of some forms there is no hindrance to this taking place, as if soul were a thing of this description. Not, to be sure, every soul, but the understanding, for that this should be so with every soul is not perhaps a thing that is possible. It is evident, therefore, that there is no necessity that on account of these at least, ideas should have an existence, for man begets man, the singular begets a certain individual. And in like manner does the case stand with the arts, for the medicinal art is the formal principle of health. Chapter 4. And as regards causes and first principles, in a manner are they different according as they belong to different things, and in a manner this is not the case. Supposing one to express himself universally, and according to analogy, the causes and first principles of all things will be the same. For one might raise the question as to whether the first principles and elements of substances, and of things which subsist as relatives, are different or the same. And, therefore, in like manner is it the case with each of the categories. But it would be absurd if there were the same principles and elements of all things. For from the same things will relatives derive their subsistence, as well as substance. What, therefore, will this be? For, besides substance and the rest of the things that are predicated, there is nothing that is in common. Prior, however, is the element to those things of which it is an element. But, assuredly, neither is substance an element of relatives, nor is any of these an element of substance. Further, how is it admissible that there should be the same elements of all things? For none of the elements can be the same with that which is a composite nature of the elements, as, for instance, neither B nor A can be the same with B, A. Neither, therefore, is it possible that any one element of those natures that are intelligible, as, for example, unity or entity, can be the element of all things, for these are present with each of the compound natures likewise. No one of them, therefore, will have a subsistence either as substance or relation, but it will be a thing expedient, however, that they should subsist in some form or other. The elements, then, of all things are not the same. Or, shall we say, just as we have already affirmed, that in one way this is the case, and in another that it is not, as perhaps in regard of sensible bodies, that which is hot subsists in one way as form, and after another mode that which is cold subsists as the privation thereof. But matter subsists as that which primarily and essentially constitutes both of these in capacity. Substances, however, are both these and such as consist of those things of which there are the first principles. Or, if any one thing is generated from what is hot and from what is cold, as flesh or bone, still that which is produced from thence must needs be different from these. The first principles and elements of these, I admit, then, are the same, yet there are different elements of different things. And, without doubt, we cannot say that the case stands in this way with all things, but analogically are the elements and first principles of all things the same, just as if one should say that there are three first principles in existence, namely form, and privation, and matter. Each of these, however, is different according as it is conversant about every genus, as in colour, white, black, surface, light, darkness, air, and from these emerge forth day and night. Since, however, not only things that are inherent are causes, but also causes of things that are external, as, for example, in the case of what imparts motion, it is evident that a first principle is a different thing from an element, yet both are causes, and into these is a first principle divided. But what subsists as that which imparts motion or rest constitutes a certain first principle and substance. Wherefore, there are in existence three elements indeed, according to analogy, but four causes and first principles, and a different cause subsists where the subject is different, and the first cause constitutes, as it were, that which imparts motion, and is different according as the subject is different. Thus, health is as form, disease as privation, body as matter. That which imparts motion is the medicinal art. Again, a house is as form, this certain sort of confusion as privation, the bricks are as matter, and that which imparts motion or the efficient cause is the builder's art. And into these, therefore, is a first principle divided. But since that which imparts motion in physical or natural things is a man, and in things springing from the understanding form, or the contrary, in one respect would there be three causes, and in another four. For the medicinal art constitutes in a manner health, and the building art the form of the house, and man begets man. Further, beside these, as that which is the first of all things is that which imparts motion, or is the efficient cause to all things. Chapter 5. And since some things involve a separable subsistence, and some do not involve a separable subsistence, the former are substances, and on this account these are the causes of all things, because the passive states and motions of things do not involve a subsistence independent of substances. In the next place, perhaps, will these constitute soul and body, or understanding and appetite and body. Moreover, in another manner, analogically, are first principles the same. For example, take the instances of energy and capacity. These, however, are both different according as the subjects of them are different, and they subsist in different ways. For in certain bodies the same thing subsists sometimes in energy, and sometimes in capacity, as wine, or flesh, or a man. But also do these fall under the category of the causes above enumerated. For form constitutes an energy, no doubt, if it be that which has a separable subsistence, and which is compounded from both. And this is the case with privation, for instance, darkness, or a creature that is sick. But matter subsists in capacity, for this is that which is endued with the capability of becoming both. But after another mode do those things differ in energy and capacity of which the matter is not the same, and of which the form is not the same, but different. as a cause of man are both the elements fire and earth, as matter, and his proper form, and if there is anything else extrinsic, I mean such as his father, and beside these the sun, and the oblique circle, which constitute neither matter, nor form, nor privation, nor are of the same species, but are motive natures. And, further, it is expedient for us to perceive that as regards causes, it is possible to enumerate some that are universal, and some that are not. Therefore, the original first principles of all things are that which subsists in energy as this first thing, and something else which subsists in potentiality. Those indeed, therefore, that are universals have not any subsistence, for the singular constitutes a first principle of singulars. For man, to be sure, is the principle of universal man, yet there is no universal man. But Peleus is the cause of Achilles, and your father of you, and this particular letter, B, is the cause of this syllable, B-A, and in short, B of B-A absolutely. In the next place, the forms of substances are first principles, but there are different causes and elements of different things, as has been declared. Thus, of the things that are not contained in the same genus, such as colours, sounds, substances, quantity, the elements are not the same, except analogically. The causes likewise of those things that are contained in the same species are different, but they are not different in species. But because the matter of singulars is a thing that is different, both your matter and form, and that which imparts motion, and the species, differ in number from mine, though, according to the formal principle of the universal, they are the same. Therefore, as to the inquiry what are first principles or elements of substances, and relations, and qualities, as to whether they are the same or different, it is evident that, if they are predicated multifariously, there are the same principles and elements belonging to everything. But if they are divided, there are not the same, but different first principles of everything, unless that also, in a certain respect, there are the same principles of all things. Thus they are the same analogically, I admit, because there is matter, form, privation, that which imparts motion, and in that way the causes of substances are as the causes of all things, because, on the supposition of substances being destroyed, all things are destroyed. Further, that which is first subsists in actuality, and in this way are these primaries different, as many as are contraries, seeing that they neither are predicated as genera, nor denominated multifariously. Further, likewise, are there different kinds of matter that are styled causes. What, therefore, the first principles of sensibles are, and what sort they are, and after what mode they are the same, and after what mode they are different, all this has been declared. Chapter 6. But since there have appeared three substances, two indeed that are natural or physical, and one which is immovable, regarding this immovable substance, we must endeavour to establish that it is necessary that it should constitute a certain eternal substance, one which is immovable. For the first of entities are substances, and if we suppose all of them to be corruptible, all things are corruptible. It is impossible, however, that in such a case motion should be either generated, or that it should be corrupted, for it was always in existence. Nor is this possible with duration, for it is not possible that there can be that which is prior and subsequent, on the supposition that time or duration has no existence. And motion, then, in this way is continuous, as also duration, for duration either is the same as motion, or it is a certain passive condition of motion. But there is not any motion that is continuous save that which is local or topical, and to this belongs the motion that is circular. But, doubtless, if there is anything that is fit for being moved, or that is productive, but not anything that energizes, in this case motion has no existence. For it is admissible that what involves capacity should not energize. There would then be no advantage gained, not even if we could make substances eternal, as those do who constitute as such the forms or ideas, unless there will be inherent some first principle capable of working a change. Therefore, neither would this be competent for such, nor would there be any other substance different from, or independent of, the forms. For, on the supposition that it will not energize, there will be no motion in existence. Further, neither will this be the case if the substance will energize, but if the substance thereof constitutes capacity. For there will not be in existence a perpetual motion, for it is possible that that which subsists in capacity should not exist. It is therefore necessary that there should be a first principle of this kind, whereof the substance constitutes an energy. Further, therefore, it is necessary that these substances do not involve a connection with matter. For it is requisite that they should be eternal, if, in sooth, there is also at least anything else that is everlasting. It is then in energy that they subsist, although this involves a matter of doubt, for it appears to be the case that what energizes should subsist entirely in a state of potentiality, but that everything that is endued with capacity should not altogether energize. Wherefore, we may assume that potentiality is a thing that is antecedent to energy. But, surely, if this be the case, no one of the entities will be in existence, for it is possible that a thing possess a capacity of existence, but that yet it should not be in existence. If the case, however, stands as the theologians affirm, I mean, those who are for generating all things from night, or as the natural philosophers, who say that all things subsisted simultaneously, the same impossibility will ensue. For how, let me ask, will matter be put in motion if nothing that subsists in energy will be a cause? For the matter of a house, at least, will not itself move itself, but the builder's art will. Nor does the menstrual blood move itself, nor earth, but seeds, and human seed. Wherefore, some have recourse to an energy that is always in action, as Leucippus and Plato, for they maintain that motion is always in existence. But why, and in what way, they do not state, nor how this is the case, nor do they assign the cause of this perpetuity of motion. For nothing is put in motion at random, but it is necessary that there be something always in subsistence, as now indeed one thing is by nature moved in this way, and again is moved by force, either by mind or something else, after a different manner. Then, what sort is the first motion? For this inevitably differs as much as possible. But certainly neither is it possible for Plato, at least, to call that a first principle which imparts motion to itself, and which he sometimes considers to be a first principle. For subsequent to, and yet coincident with, the heaven is the soul, as he says. Therefore, the supposition of the priority of potentiality to energy is in a manner a correct one, but in a manner is not so. And how this is correct has been declared. But that energy may be a thing that is antecedent to potentiality, Anaxagoras testifies, for the understanding subsists in energy. And Empedocles in his theory about harmony and discord, and this is confirmed in the assertion of certain philosophers as to the existence of perpetual motion, as Leucippus, wherefore not in an infinite time did chaos or night subsist, but the same things continually were in existence as are in existence at present, either in a revolutionary system or otherwise. On the supposition that energy is a thing that is antecedent to potentiality. Supposing a thing, therefore, to be the same continually in a revolutionary system, it is necessary that something always should remain energizing in like manner. But if there is likely to ensue generation and corruption, it is necessary that there be something else which continually energizes at one time in one way, and at another in another. It is necessary, then, that it energizes in this way, no doubt, essentially, or from itself, but in a different way, according to something else. It must in this case energize either according to something that is different, or according to what is primary or original. It is therefore necessary that it energize according to this, for again is that a cause of energy both to this and to that other. Wherefore, that which is primary is superior as a cause, for that likewise was a cause of a thing subsisting continually after a similar manner, and something else would be the cause of the subsistence of energy in a different manner, but of its subsistence always in a different manner manifestly would both be a cause. Therefore are motions also in this manner disposed. Why, therefore, must we go in search of other first principles? Chapter 7. But since also the case stands thus, and if it be not so, things will spring from night, and from all things simultaneously, and from nonentity, these aforesaid questions may be decided. And something always would there be that is being moved with a motion that is incessant, but this is that which is circular, and this is evident not merely from reason, but from the fact itself. Wherefore, the first heaven would be eternal. There is, therefore, also something that imparts motion. Since, however, that which has motion impressed upon it, and which imparts motion, subsists as a medium, there is therefore something which, not having motion impressed upon it, yet imparts motion, which is a thing that is eternal, being both substance and energy. But in this way it imparts motion, I mean, that which is desirable and that which is intelligible impart motion, whereas they are not moved themselves. But the originals of these are the same, for a thing that is the object of a propension is that which appears fair, but a thing which is originally selected from volition actually is fair. Now, we desire a thing because it appears fair, rather than that a thing appears fair because we desire it, for the perception constitutes a first principle. But mind is moved by that which is intelligible, and the other coordination constitutes essentially that which is intelligible, and belonging to this is the first substance, and of this is that substance which subsists absolutely and according to energy. Unity, however, is not the same with what is simple or absolute, for unity signifies measure, but what is absolute signifies the mode in which a thing itself subsists. But certainly both that which is fair and that which is desirable for its own sake belong to the same coordinate series, and that which is first is the most excellent invariably, or amounts to that which is analogous to it. But that the final cause subsists in things that are immovable, the division makes manifest. For the final cause of anything resides in those things of which the one is in existence and the other is not. Now, that which first imparts motion does so as a thing that is loved, and that which has motion impressed upon it imparts motion to other things. If indeed, therefore, anything is being moved, it is admissible also that it should subsist in a different manner. Wherefore, if the primary motion constitute energy also, so far forth as the thing is moved, in this way is it likewise possible that it should subsist after a different mode, in place though not in substance. Since, however, there is something that imparts motion, itself being immovable, and subsisting in energy, this does not by any means admit of subsisting in a different manner. For the primary motion belongs to the changes, and of this that which is circular, but this first mover imparts motion to that. Of necessity, in this case, must this immovable first mover constitute an entity, and so far forth as it subsists necessarily, so far forth does it subsist after an excellent manner, and in this way constitutes a first principle. For what is necessary subsists in thus many ways, in the first place by what is accomplished by violence, because it is contrary to free will, and secondly, as that without which a thing does not subsist in an excellent manner, and thirdly, as that which could not be otherwise from what it is, but involves an absolute subsistence. From a first principle, then, of this kind, I mean one that is involved in the assumption of a first mover, hath depended the heaven and nature. Now, the course of life of this first mover, in like manner with our own, for a limited period of time, is such also as is the most excellent, for in the present instance doth that first mover continue in the enjoyment of the principle of life for ever. For with us certainly such a thing as this would be impossible, but not so with the first mover, since even doth the energy or activity of this first mover give rise unto pleasure or satisfaction on the part of such, and on this account vigilance, exercise of the senses, and perception in general are what is most productive of pleasure or satisfaction, and with hopes and recollections is the case the same for these reasons. Now, essential perception is the perception of that which is essentially the most excellent, and that which is most essential perception is the perception of that which is most essential. The mind, however, is cognizant of itself by participation in that which falls within the province of the mind as its object, for it becomes an object of perception by contact, and by an act of intellectual apprehension, so that the mind, and that which is an object of perception for the mind, are the same. For that which is receptive of impressions from what is an object of perception, and is substance, constitutes mind, and when in possession of these impressions it energizes, or subsists in a condition of activity. Wherefore, that seems to belong to the first mover rather than to the mind of man, and it is a divine prerogative which the mind appears to possess, and contemplation constitutes what is most agreeable and excellent. If, therefore, God in this way possesses such an excellent mode of subsistence for ever, as we do for a limited period of duration, the divine nature is admirable, and if he possesses it in a more eminent degree, still more admirable will be the divine nature. In this way, however, is the deity disposed as to existence, and the principle of life is, at any rate, inherent in the deity. For the energy or active exercise of mind constitutes life, and God, as above delineated, constitutes this energy, and essential energy belongs to God as his best and everlasting life. Now, our statement is this, that the deity is an animal that is everlasting, and most excellent in nature, so that with the deity, life and duration are uninterrupted and eternal, for this constitutes the very essence of God. As many philosophers, however, as adopt the supposition, such as the Pythagoreans and Speusippus, that what is best and most fair is not to be found in the principle of things, from the fact that though the first principles, both of plants and animals are causes, yet that what is fair and perfect resides in created things, as results from these. Persons, I say, who entertain these sentiments do not form their opinions correctly. For seed arises from other natures that are antecedent and perfect, and seed is not the first thing, whereas that which is perfect is, as for example, just as if one were to say that a man is antecedent to seed, not the man that is being generated from seed, but another from whom the seed flows. That, indeed, there exists a certain eternal substance, and a substance that is immovable, and possesses actually a subsistence separable from sensibles, is evident from the statements that have been made above. But it also has been demonstrated that it is not possible for this substance to involve any magnitude, but it is devoid of parts and indivisible. For it imparts motion throughout infinite duration, and nothing that is finite involves infinite potentiality. Since, however, every magnitude is either infinite or finite, for this reason such a substance as the above would not involve a finite magnitude, and therefore it cannot involve an infinite magnitude, because, in short, there is no infinite magnitude in existence. But unquestionably also it has been demonstrated that such is impassive and unalterable, for all other motions are subsequent to that motion which is local or topical. These statements, therefore, make it evident why it is that the deity is disposed as to existence after this manner. Chapter 8. Now, whether are we to admit that there exists one substance of this description or many? And if so, how many such there are ought not to escape our notice. But we should call to remembrance also the assertions of other philosophers, because regarding the multitude of these substances they have not spoken aught which amounts to even anything that is clear in the expression. For indeed, the opinion in regard of ideas does not involve any peculiar investigation, for the persons who affirm the existence of ideas affirm that these ideas are numbers. And as regards numbers, at one time they speak of them as of things that are infinite, and at other times as of things that are limited, as far as to the decade. As to the cause, however, why it is that there subsists a multitude of numbers of this kind, nothing is expressed by them with demonstrative certainty. This, however, must we declare from principles that are taken for granted, and that have been determined. For the first principle, and the original existence of entities, is a thing that is immovable, both essentially and according to accident, and it imparts motion with an original and eternal and single motion. But since that which is being moved must needs derive its motion from something, and that which first imparts motion is essentially immovable, and an eternal motion derives that motion from what is eternal as a moving cause, and a single motion its motion from what is single, and since we see that beside the simple revolutionary motion of the universe, which we say derives its motion from the first substance, and that which is immovable, there are other motions that are everlasting, namely, those of the planets. For eternal and unstable in its movement is a body that is circular, but we have furnished demonstrations in regard of these in our Physics. Now, I say, since the foregoing is the case, each of these motions must needs derive its motion from that which is both immovable essentially and is an eternal substance. For the nature of the stars consists in being a certain eternal substance, and that which imparts motion is eternal, and is antecedent to that which has motion impressed upon it. And that which involves priority of subsistence to a substance must needs also be a substance. It is evident, therefore, that it is expedient that there should be in existence substances of this kind, such as are both naturally eternal, as well as essentially immovable and devoid of magnitude, and that, too, on account of the cause that has been stated previously. That indeed, therefore, these substances are in existence, and which of these is primary, and which of them is secondary, according to the same order, with the orbital motions of the stars, is evident. But at present must we discover the multitude of these orbital motions from that department of the philosophy of the mathematical sciences which is most appropriately devoted to this purpose, I mean from astronomy. For this science institutes an investigation respecting a substance that is cognizant by sense, no doubt, but such as is eternal. The rest of the mathematical sciences, however, are not concerned about any substance whatever. For example, take the case of the science respecting numbers and geometry. That, therefore, there are numerous orbital motions belonging to the stars that are being moved across the arch of heaven is evident to those who have even moderately busied themselves in such inquiries. For more motions than one do each of the planetary stars assume. But as to how many these happen to be, let us likewise now declare the statements which some of the mathematicians make on this subject, for the purpose of understanding the point under investigation, in order that it may be possible to apprehend a certain multitude of these when mentally defined. But as to what remains, we must ourselves investigate into some points, but we must make inquiries into others from persons engaged in investigations into these subjects, if, haply, anything beside the statements that already have been made may appear to those who are busied in these speculations. And if so, we should bestow affection upon both, yet yield our assent only to those who are more accurate. Eudoxus, in his system, therefore, laid down the orbital motion of the sun and moon to be severally in 3 spheres, the first of which he maintained was that of the fixed stars, and the second was that which accords with the circle which passes through the central signs of the zodiac, and the third with that circle which is situated obliquely in the latitude of the zodiacal signs. Now, that oblique circle through which the moon is carried is situated in a wider latitude than that through which the sun is carried. But of the devious or erratic stars, he makes a disposition of each in 4 spheres, and of these, likewise, he considers the first and second to be the same with those of the sun and moon. For the sphere of the fixed stars, according to him, is the same with that first sphere which carries along all the orbs, and that which has been arranged under this, and possesses a motion corresponding with the circle that passes through the central signs of the zodiac, he considers a sphere common to all these heavenly bodies. He is of opinion, however, that the poles of the third sphere, which is common to all, are situated in that circle which passes through the central signs of the zodiac, and that the motion of the fourth sphere is in an orbit declining towards the centre of the third, and that the poles of the third sphere are the proper poles of the other spheres, but that Venus and Mercury have the same poles. Callippus, however, sets down the same disposition of the spheres with Eudoxus, that is, the same arrangement of their mutual distances, but with respect to their multitude, he ascribed to the star of Jupiter, as well as to that of Saturn, the same number with Eudoxus. Yet still he thinks that to the luminary of the sun, and to that of the moon, there should further be annexed 2 spheres, that is, supposing one likely to furnish a solution of the phenomena. And in regard of the other spheres of the planets, he adds 1 sphere to each. It is necessary, however, on the supposition that all, when collected together, are likely to furnish a solution of the phenomena, that according to each of the erratic stars there should be different spheres revolving less by one than those which carry along the planets, and, in regard of position, restore into the same place the first sphere invariably of the star which is ranked in an inferior order. For in this way only is it possible that by the orbital motion of the planets should be produced all the phenomena that may be observed. Since, therefore, as regards the spheres in which the planets are carried along, some of them are made to amount to 8, but others to 25, and of these it is not necessary that those merely should have revolving spheres in which a star arranged lowest down is carried. Those, accordingly, that impart a revolutionary motion to the spheres of the 2 first will be 6 in number, while those to the spheres of the 4 subsequent stars will be 11. The total amount of all the spheres, however, as well those that carry along the stars, as also those that make them revolve, will be 55. But if one were not to add the motions of the moon, which we have mentioned to the sun also, all the spheres will be 47. Let the number, then, of the spheres amount to so many, wherefore it is reasonable to suppose that both the substances and the first principles which are immovable, and are cognizant by the senses, should be so many in number as we have enumerated. For then there must necessarily be such a number as this. Let it be left to those to decide who are endued with greater ability to declare their sentiments on such points. If, however, it is not possible that there should be any orbital motion which does not contribute towards the orbital motion of a star, and further, if it is requisite to suppose that every nature and every substance ought to be regarded, provided it be devoid of passion and be essential, as having attained the most excellent end, in this case there would not be in existence any other nature independent of these. But it is necessary that this should constitute the total amount of substances. For whether there should be others, they would impart motion, as being an end of orbital motion. But at any rate, it is impossible that there should be other orbital motions beside those that have been enumerated. And this supposition it would be reasonable to arrive at from observing the bodies that are being moved along the surface of the heavens. For on the supposition that everything that is borne along the firmament subsists by the constitution of nature, on account of that body which is borne along, and that every motion belongs to something that is carried forward, there would not exist any orbital motion on account of itself, or of another motion, but on account of the stars would it exist. For if we admit that orbital motion will subsist on account of motion of the same sort, it will be requisite that this latter, likewise, should subsist on account of other orbital motions, so that, since it is not also possible to go on in a progression to infinity, an end of every orbital motion will be some one of those divine bodies that are borne along the surface of the heaven. That, however, there is one heaven is evident. For if there were many heavens, as there are men, in regard of each will there be such a first principle as is one in species, but in number many at least. Such things, however, as are many in number, involve a connection with matter. For there is one and the same mode of reasoning applicable to the case of many. Take the instance of a man. Yet Socrates is one. But that which ranks as first amongst formal causes does not involve a connection with matter, for it subsists in actuality. Accordingly, in both reason and number, that which primarily imparts motion is immovable, and that which has motion impressed upon it, in this case is always and uninterruptedly one thing merely. Such being true, there is consequently in existence one solitary heaven. Traditions, however, have been handed down from our predecessors and the very ancient philosophers, and left to their posterity in the form of a myth, to the effect that these many heavens, supposing them to exist, both are gods, and that the divinity encompasses the entire of nature. And the remainder of these traditions in the present day have been brought forward, clothed in a fabulous garb, for the purpose of winning the assent of the multitude, and enforcing the utility that is urged in favour of the laws, and of general expediency. For they speak of these as subsisting in the form of the human species, and as being like in appearance to certain of the rest of the animal kingdom, and other statements consequential upon these, and similar to those that have been declared, do they put forward. Now, if, as regards these traditions, any one, having separated this from amongst the others, may receive merely the first assertion, namely, that they supposed the first substances to be gods. He would consider that this statement had been made after a divine manner, and in accordance with what is to be expected in the discovery, as frequently as is consistent with possibility, as well of every art as of every system of philosophy. And in the loss of these again, he must conclude that likewise these opinions of those very ancient philosophers, as relics, have been preserved up to the time of the present day. This opinion, therefore, of our forefathers, and that which has been traditionally handed down from the very earliest speculators, is evident to us thus far, and no more. Chapter 9. There are points, however, respecting mind, which involve certain subjects of doubt. For it seems certainly to constitute the most divine existence amongst phenomena. But after what manner it is disposed, so as that it should be a thing of this sort, is attended with certain difficulties. For whether it be void of the faculty of understanding anything, but is like one who is sleeping, what, may I ask, would there be reverential in such a condition of being? Or, supposing that it possesses the faculty of understanding, and yet that there be something which is dominant over this faculty, for in this case that which is its substance is not intelligence, but capacity. Should the foregoing be true, we could not say that mind would be the most excellent substance, for it is through the faculty of the understanding that which is entitled to reverence is inherent in the mind. But, further, whether understanding constitute its substance, or whether perception does, what, may I ask, does it understand? For either it is itself that it understands, or something else. And supposing that it understands something else, either it will invariably be the same, or something different. Whether, then, is there any difference, or no difference at all, between its understanding what is fair, and understanding what is casual? Or, also, would it be an absurd idea to imagine that it exercises the faculty of cognition in regard of certain things? It is evident, therefore, that that which understands is most divine, and most entitled to reverence, and that it undergoes no change. For change would presuppose a transition into something that is worse. And a thing of this sort would, in the present instance, amount to a certain motion. In the first place, then, of course, supposing that the mind were not perception or intelligence, but capacity, it is reasonable to infer that continuity of perception would be a laborious operation for the mind. And in the next place, it is evident that there would be in existence something else that is more entitled to reverence than mind, namely, that which is an object of perception to the mind. For both the faculty of understanding and actual perception will be present to the mind, even in its understanding that which is most inferior. So that we must avoid this consequence, for also would it be better not to see some things than to see them. Hence, perception would not constitute that which is most excellent. Accordingly, may we assume that mind is cognizant of its own operations, if it really is that which is most superior, and if perception amounts to the perception of a perception. Now, scientific knowledge invariably appears as well as perception by sense and opinion, and the faculty of thought, to be conversant about something different from itself, and to be conversant about itself only in a secondary or subordinate sense. Further, if we suppose that understanding is different from being an object of perception to the understanding, according to which of these will subsistence in an excellent way be inherent in mind? For neither is it the same thing the being inherent in an act of perception by the understanding, and in an object of perception to the understanding. Or shall we say that in the case of some things the science constitutes itself that which is the object of the science? In the case, I admit, of the productive sciences, the substance and the essence do not involve a connection with matter, whereas in the case of the speculative sciences, the definition or formal principle is the object of the science, as well as is the perception exercised by the mind. Inasmuch, then, as the object of the understanding is not a different thing from the understanding itself, in the case of as many things as do not involve a connection with matter, they will be the same thing, and the act of perception by the mind will be identical with the object of perception. Moreover, therefore, a doubt remains whether an object of perception is a composite nature or not. For if this be the case, the object of perception as a compound would undergo a change in the parts of the entire. Or shall we say that everything is indivisible which does not involve a connection with matter, as the human mind? Or are we to take for granted that the perception of compound objects involves a connection with matter during a certain portion of duration? For an excellent condition of subsistence does not always reside in this particular thing or in that, but that which is most excellent subsists in a thing, viewed as a certain entirety, being something different from itself, and therefore the first and actual perception by mind of mind itself doth subsist in this way throughout all eternity. Chapter 10. But we must also consider in what manner the nature of the entire creation involves what is good and what is most excellent, whether there exists something that has been separated in point of fact, and which actually subsists essentially, or whether we are to assume the existence of order, or make both of these assumptions together, just as we might illustrate our meaning by the case of an army. For the good or excellent condition of an army depends upon the order that is enforced, and the commander who aims to promote this subordination. Even this person, in a more eminent degree, may be regarded as a cause of such an excellent condition. For this officer is not set over the army on account of the order that is found to prevail there, but that order is found to exist on account of the command exercised by this officer. All things, however, are coordinated after a certain mode, but not after a similar mode. Take the classification, for example, of aquatic and winged animals, and of plants. And they are not disposed after such a way as that there should not subsist anything in common to either in relation to the other, although in respect of some point do they involve some resemblance. For indeed, in regard of one characteristic are all things ranked under coordinate series. But as in a house it is allowable, least of all, for the free to do anything whatsoever they please, but all things, or most things, have been reduced into a state of orderly arrangement, so to slaves likewise and wild beasts, only in a small degree belongs a desire to do what may contribute to the general advantage. But for the most part their operations are confined to whatsoever chances to fall in their way, for the nature of each of them constitutes to them a first principle of this description. But I say in this instance that it is requisite for all to attain unto a condition where distinctions will be drawn, and other things subsist in this way, of which all participate for the constitution or preservation of the entire. But whatever impossibilities or absurdities ensue to those who make assertions in a different way, and what sort of theories those put forward on the subject who express themselves in a more elegant or accomplished manner, and in the case of which of these there prevail the least number of doubts, we must not allow such inquiries to escape our observation. For all philosophers are for producing all things from contraries. Neither, however, is the expression, quote, all things, close quote, nor the expression, quote, from contraries, close quote, correctly employed by these speculators, nor do they declare, as regards those things in which the contraries are inherent, in what manner they will consist of contraries, for contraries are mutually impassive. But by us is this controversy decided rationally by the introduction of a certain third nature. Some, however, constitute some one of the contraries as matter, just as those do who make the odd subject for the even, or plurality for unity. And this likewise is decided in the same manner, for the matter which is one is not what is contrary to anything. Further, all things except unity will participate in what is worthless, for the evil itself constitutes one or other of the elements. The other speculators assert, however, that neither what is good and what is evil are first principles at all, notwithstanding that what is good is in a most eminent degree a first principle in all things. And some, I admit, correctly make this assertion of what is good. I mean, that we must consider it a first principle. After what mode, however, it is that what is good constitutes a first principle, they do not state, whether it is to be regarded as an end, or as a moving cause, or as a formal principle. Now, Empedocles also forms his opinions absurdly upon this point, for he makes harmony to constitute what is good, and this harmony, in his system, subsists even as a first principle that imparts motion, for it has the power of congregating entities, and it subsists as matter, for it is a portion of the mixture. Now, even on the supposition that to harmony has it happened in this same system that it should subsist as matter, and a first principle, and as a power that imparts motion, yet the essence of this is not the same with the essence of these, according to which of them, therefore, will harmony subsist. And that discord should be a thing that is incorruptible would be absurd likewise, and yet this very thing constitutes the nature of what is evil. But Anaxagoras regarded what is good as a first principle, so far as it is a power that imparts motion, for mind in his system imparts motion. It imparts motion, however, for the sake of something else. Wherefore, that is different from that for the sake of which it subsists, except it subsists as we say it actually does, for the medicinal art, in a manner, constitutes health. But it was also an absurdity contained in the Anaxagorean philosophy, the not having produced a contrary to what is good as well as to mind. But all who assert contraries to be first principles do not employ contraries as such, unless one is disposed to handle the subject in a careless vein. And why is it that some things are corruptible and some things incorruptible? No one declares, for they produce all entities from the same first principles. Further, some of these speculators produce entities from what is non-entity, but some, that they may not be forced to this, make all things to be one. Further, no one lays down a reason why generation will always exist, and what the cause of generation is, nobody declares. And for those who create two first principles, will it be necessary to have a different first principle, which would be more dominant, as well as for those philosophers who introduce forms, because there really exists another principle more dominant than these. For why has matter participated, or why does it participate in these ideas? And for others it is necessary that there should be something that is contrary to wisdom, and to that which is the science most entitled to reverence. But to us this is not necessary, for there is nothing contrary to what is primary. For all the contraries involve matter, and these subsist in capacity. But contrary ignorance is opposed to what is contrary, yet nothing is contrary to what is primary. Further, on the supposition that there do not exist other things beside those that are cognizant by the senses, there will not subsist a first principle, and order, and generation, and the celestial bodies will have no existence. But there is always a first principle of the principle, just as we find in the systems of theologians and all natural philosophers. Now, admitting that there will be forms or numbers, they will not constitute a cause of anything. And if they are not a cause of anything, neither will they be a cause of motion at any rate. Further, how, let me ask, will magnitude and continuity arise from things that are devoid of magnitude? For number will not produce a continuous quantity, either as that which imparts motion or as form. But certainly there will not be anything, at least, belonging to the contraries, which is both productive and motive, for it would admit of non-existence. But surely the energy or producing cause is subsequent to the capacity, and in such a case eternal entities do not exist, but yet they do exist. Accordingly, some one of these hypotheses must be rejected, and this has been declared in the above statement that capacity antecedes energy, as to how it must be accomplished. Further, in what way numbers may be one, or soul and body, and in general, form and the thing itself, no one says anything on this point, nor is it possible that one should declare his sentiments thereupon unless he express himself as we do, namely, to the effect that it is the cause which imparts motion that is the agent of production. But they who say that mathematical number is the first, and in this way continually suppose the existence of another substance adhering thereto in succession, and of different first principles belonging unto each, these make the substance of the universe to be adventitious. For in no wise does one substance contribute anything towards another, as to whether it exists or does not exist, and besides this they introduce many first principles. The entities, however, do not choose to submit to injudicious government. Quote, the government of many is not a good thing. Let there be one ruler. Close quote. End of Book 11.